What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Let me just say it straight. This month in general was straight up bonkers. What happened in 4 episodes is more than I could say about WWE nowadays. Sure, there's stories, but the amount of legendary moments from October of 1998, damn. So you just watch any Raw from late 1998 and you're gonna get the wildest stuff. Simply put, doesn't matter if it was an episode from December, November, you're always gonna find something that's crazy. Be it Shawn Michaels being a corrupt commissioner, the Undertaker and a ministry story. The easiest thing I could just do is watch Raw from late 1998 up to WrestleMania 15. Whenever I go back and watch something from there, the time passes by quickly. No lie, it just does. Anyways, this is the October 19th, 1998 episode of Raw. Now, the main story here is Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin once again. So the story goes, Vince fired Stone Cold Steve Austin for not raising the Undertaker or Kane's hand in the WWF title match the previous night. The boss was in a very festive mood due to this, as the previous 3 weeks of his life were hell. Simply put, they were hell. First, his nemesis comes in a Zamboni. Second, his ankle was shattered by the Brothers of Destruction. Third, he was assaulted in a hospital. And fourth, his Corvette was filled with cement. So now his life is finally back together. The one guy that was causing all of this ruckus is no longer in his company. Was it a stupid movie? Yeah, he's going to lose a lot of money, but he just hated the guy so much it didn't matter how much money he was going to lose. He just wanted to get rid of him. Anyways, the rating for this one was a 5.0 over WCW Nitro's 4.4. And the following week ended up being the final time WCW ever beat WWF in the ratings war, and this could be attributed to the replay of the Halloween Havoc main event and the fallout to the event. So yeah, right now let's get into it. Apparently Vince decided to throw a celebration in light of firing Stone Cold Steve Austin. JR even said that he was in an orgasmic state. That's how good it felt. Every wrestler and personnel was in the ring per order of Vince. He announced that on November 15th, there will be an undisputed champion because on that night, there will be a one-night tournament to determine the next WWF champion. To say the fans hated Vince for firing Austin, a huge understatement. I mean, they already hated him regardless, but now there was even more reason to despise the guy. McMahon was taking jabs at the fans and Austin showing footage from the previous night. He mentioned a rumor that Stone Cold was hunting for a job, but what he didn't know was that he was hunting for his head. And Vince, his feelings towards firing Austin, well,
it was better than sex.
Whoa! I'll be damned. He hoped the entire roster learned a valuable lesson to not cross the boss because no one is bigger than Mr. McMahon. McMahon considered Austin 316 a collector's item now that he was gone. And what replaces it? Well, McMahon 316, which says, "I got the brass to fire your ass." The fans were booing, and all of a sudden the disgruntled ex-employee was shown on the Titantron and he was armed. Once Vince noticed this, he ran into a safe room with the big boss man and his stooges. He demanded the cameraman document everything. Jerry Lawler was pissing his pants in worry, and it was time for the first match. Anyways, Ken Shamrock faced X-Pac in the first match. At this point, Shamrock had just turned into a heel and he was the IC champion. X-Pac, on the other hand, was accompanied by China. He was a European champion, and the former 1-2-3 Kid was fighting on behalf of Triple H, who got a door shut on his injured leg by Shamrock the previous night on Heat. Shamrock took control early on with the strikes, suplexes, and despite that match, there was more of a focus on McMahon and Austin. Meanwhile, a couple of officers came out to apprehend China, who apparently was getting sued by Mark Henry for sexual harassment, something along the lines of that. In the ring, X-Pac made a comeback of sorts only to get power slammed. Shamrock almost got a Bronco but moved out of the way. He had a belly-to-belly, a hurricane, and all of a sudden, Mankind was here. The amount of run-ins that happened during this time period, ridiculous, but who cares? He attempted the mandible claw but failed. X-Pac took advantage with the X-Factor to win the match. Now you're probably wondering, why was Mankind out here? Well, he had faced Shamrock in a title match the previous night and he wasn't satisfied with what had transpired, this time making himself tap out. It's confusing. Basically, Mankind put himself in the mandible claw and forced himself to submit, not Shamrock's ankle lock. Meanwhile, China was loaded into a cop car and 2 detectives took notice of Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was showing off his hunting rifle. He signed autographs and Vince was raging and he thought Austin on the loose was the scariest thing in the world. So he asked an officer to do something about it, and that guy, he refused to be shouted at by McMahon and he just walked away basically. In the ring, the Headbangers were doing a different version of the Outlaw shtick.
10 champions of the world!
They were set to face the Legion of Doom, who had some issues within. You know, Darren Drozdov was Animal's partner from here on. Hawk had some issues in storyline. That's where they were during this time period. This match, it was back and forth. It didn't last that long, and no team had the outright advantage. Hawk at one point accidentally distracted Droz, leading to a headbanger victory. It's a blink and you miss type. There's a lot of those in the Attitude Era, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. It might be a bad thing to you. I don't really care. It's not even a big deal. Yeah, that's what happened. The whole Hawk story would take a turn for the worse in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, Vince's stooges went to grab some things, leaving him alone with Mankind. Fans loved him, but Vince absolutely disliked him. He hated his guts. In the ring, The Undertaker and Paul Bearer were set to address the events of Judgment Day. For context, Taker turned heel for the first time in about 6 years and realigned himself with Paul Bearer. He officially announced a reconciliation and explained why he would align himself with such a despicable and evil man. Well, his proof was in the words. It's proof in the pudding. Despicable, maniacal. Simply put, Undertaker was evil and he was ready to let loose the Ministry of Darkness onto the World Wrestling Federation. Once again, gotta mention this. The Ministry of Darkness didn't really exist at this point. It was just created on this night, and The Undertaker would actually have followers in a couple of months. Paul Bearer, on the other hand, revealed he's used Kane since childhood, and he's useless due to the fact that he can't understand the dark. The dead man then revealed the biggest news, which is he set that fire. It wasn't Kane who set the fire, because Kane, he's weak. He's not strong, so Taker did it with the intention of scarring Kane, I guess. Or killing him, who knows. All along, it was believed to be Kane, but it wasn't him. The Big Red Machine then came out with a casket for unknown reasons, and he challenged The Undertaker to a casket match for later that night. He told the dead man that he's gonna rest in peace. So all this time, Kane was the bad guy. I mean, how in the hell are you going to side with Taker if you're looking at it from a moral standpoint? The guy actually had a reason to attack his brother. I mean, he's the one that caused the fire. That's what I'm trying to say, so yeah. Backstage, Mankind suggested Vince rehire Austin so they can form a clique. I mean, just imagine Sacco in hand, Vince, Austin, they're all hanging out in the back. They have a cup of coffee in their hands, and they're bullying the rest of the roster. Mankind then decided to play Twister, and this led to his departure.
Get out! Get out! I'm in danger!
The next match was between Steve Blackman and Jeff Jarrett. Now, a little side note, this was Deborah McMichael's debut in the WWF. She did cross paths with Jarrett in WCW a couple of years ago, but now they were a pairing. Cheap shot to start things off. The action was fast-paced once more, and it seemed like Jarrett had more of an advantage. And Blackman made his comeback. Knockdown, elbow, hip toss, bicycle kick, and all of a sudden, the Blue Blazer attacked to cause a DQ. Double J brought in a guitar, Al Snow ran in there, and just as he was going to use head, he couldn't. I don't know why, and Jarrett took advantage by whacking the living daylights out of Snow. Now, why didn't he whack him with a head? Apparently, the mannequin had an eye for Deborah McMichael. That's why. But yeah, this match, it wasn't bad, but once again, I don't watch Attitude Era stuff for the matches. I just watch it the way it is, In the back, Vince was nervous as hell. The phone rang, and he was quite hesitant to pick up and answer, but when he did...
Your time's up, you sorry bastard.
After the commercial break, Vince had somebody on the outside, and it was time for the escape plan. Once he reached the exit, all he had to do was steer straight and jump to the limo, but that's easier said than done. Right when he entered the limo, Austin appeared and walked him back to the room. It was a pretty bumpy ride, and nobody was willing to help. After the commercial break, Austin was asking Vince a bunch of random questions, and in the arena, The Rock was ready to wrestle. Now, I'm not sure why, but his music was dubbed.
Chaotic and people rush into there. Oh, you got.
Anyways, at this point, the People's Champion was really on another level. He was starting to rise at a very rapid pace, and before he can contend for the WWF title, he wanted to settle his issues with his former nation friends. I will definitely make a Rise of Rock video in the future, hopefully. Anyways, Mark Henry accompanied D'Lo Brown to the ring, and he was the one who got China arrested, I might add. In the ring, The Rock took early control. D'Lo quickly bounced back, and it was cool to see that he was over with the fans. I mean, mid-card talent back then was prioritized, I guess. Mark Henry on the outside took advantage of the ref and attacked Rocky. D'Lo made a mistake, and Rock was back in the fight. He hit the body slam and went for the People's Elbow, but since D'Lo was wearing protection, it was essentially nothing. It didn't hurt him. He tried going up top, only to get caught and receive a Rock bottom, which gave The Rock the victory. The Nation attacked after the match and left the Great One wounded. He was holding his ribs. In the back, Austin was continuously teasing Vince with that little knife, and in his eyes, he thought the boss was dumb. He promised to end him just like that, soon. It could mean just about anything. Vince was like, they're gonna get you soon or whatever, and Austin was angry at this statement. He said that he went hunting and all he found was a jackass. In the ring, Tiger Ali Singh was once again ridiculing the fans. He thought America was stupid for many reasons, such as eating canned meats and whatnot. And once again, he was going to pay $5,000 for anyone that eats
Baboos Kielbasa!
Obviously, there was a bunch that accepted, but he ended up choosing a woman to swallow the entire thing. She didn't. He was basically trying to prove that Americans can do anything for money, and all of a sudden, The Godfather came out. He revealed that the girl used to be one of his hoes, and by the looks of it, he said this, she's a good hoe. Tiger Ali Singh then shouted, I wanted an amateur, not a professional. The pimp then told Tiger that he could have spent the $500 on a night with her. They brawled before a couple of officials managed to separate them. Backstage, Austin demanded Vince squeal like a pig for him, oink oink. The Texas rattlesnake was essentially instilling fear into the boss's mind. He's shouting for help, but nobody gave a damn. Everyone was too scared to help Vince. That's how bad it was for him. Austin duct taped him, and the reason why none of his guys made the save is because one, Boss Man took McMahon's family out of the city to the airport. And second, the Stooges were looking for something, and they probably got the news that Austin was in there, and so they never bothered to try and do anything. That's what I personally think. The next match was between Mankind and Val Venis. Now, around this time, Mankind was among the most over stars. He was probably number 2 or number 3. Why? Not only because of the bumps he takes, but because of the incorporation of comedy into his character and Mr. Sacco. The Big Valboski wasn't up to par with his previous performances due to an incident from the previous night. It was Goldust's fault, by the way. Collar and elbow tie-up. This happened, which can be attributed to Val's injury, or they are just both insane. And would you look at the Valboski fan club? Despite the injury, Val Venis took control, and it was all good from here on until he landed on the ropes. Everything went south from there on. Mankind targeted the groin area, hit the double arm DDT before pulling out Mr. Sacco. Terry Runnels distracted the ref, and Ken Shamrock appeared. He blasted Mankind with the chair to give the victory to Val Venis. Right after the match, Foley engaged in the brawl with Shamrock throughout the arena, and on the Titantron, Goldust appeared. He promised to shatter Val's dream again and again. Why? So we could remember the name of Goldust. It was a bizarre feud, as Goldust had just returned after being a born-again Christian in storyline. It was random, it was abrupt, it's confusing, it's bizarre, it's all that. As they're standing in the ring, Terry whispered something into Val's ear, and he got angry and stormed off. Once again, the action wasn't memorable, but I don't really mind once again. This is the kind of stuff that happens. If you're watching a Attitude Era for matches, I don't think you're gonna like it at all. Anyways, in the back, Austin told McMahon that he's not out to inflict physical pain. He's got way bigger plans. Vince was crying, and Austin was like,
You ain't feel a damn thing.
I mean, that can mean just about anything. Austin was in quite a excited mood. He played a game called You Bet Your Life. Let me explain it right now. If Vince chooses either The Undertaker or Kane, he chose Kane. If Kane wins, Austin will do things the easy way. But if anything else happens, it's the Stone Cold way, and it was time for the main event. So basically, this thing, it was do or die for Vince, basically. Right out of the gate, Kane brought the fight. Taker targeted the thigh muscle, and the action wasn't controlled by one individual in general. Like, Taker hits a DDT, Kane sits up, no-sells the rights, and sends Taker to the casket. Phenom fights back, hits a DDT in the casket, and all of a sudden, the lid's shut. They break the casket from inside, and the match was essentially ruined. I mean, how is there going to be a casket match without a casket? Kane knocked down his brother before setting his sights on Paul Bearer. Unfortunately for him, he received a chair shot, and The Undertaker walked to the back. Kane followed along shortly, and meanwhile, per the results, Austin's going to do something to Vince. He's crying, and they were on their way to the arena. The fans loudly chanted, Austin, Austin, and there they are. The fans were cheering in excitement. Austin had a bow and arrow in hand, and in the ring, he mentioned Vince's bragging from earlier on. He showed footage from earlier, and Vince was wincing. He was crying. He was in tears, and all of a sudden, he's all humble. He learned to be humble. He told Austin during the build-up of Judgment Day, you will be humbled. Well, guess who's humble now, huh? Stone Cold then handed the boss an envelope that I will mention soon. Vince was praying, and Austin wanted to show McMahon his pathetic face on the Titantron. He asked the fans if they want Vince's eyes to pop out of the front of his head, and they obviously shouted, hell yeah. And then, Austin pulled out a damn gun. McMahon's eyes were about to pop out like he said, and then it's revealed to be a toy. The entire time, Austin was armed with a toy. Stone Cold said that it wasn't he who screwed with Vince McMahon, it was Vince who screwed Vince. And the next t-shirt that is on the way says, McMahon 316, which says, I just pissed my pants. But that wasn't it. Austin delivered a stunner and celebrated to end Raw on top. Now in storyline, Austin was right. Vince didn't want him as champion, right? Sure, you don't want him as champion, but to interfere in his matches and whatnot, that's corrupt. That's something that he ain't supposed to do. And the fact that he screwed him over a couple of times, well, it wasn't going to sit well with Austin. He did something about it, as you can see here. Austin delivered a second stunner as Raw went off the air. After the show, the fans loudly chanted, asshole, asshole. They're the Stooges. I think my claims are right. They noticed Austin in storyline once again, and they didn't do anything about it. Okay, now the question. What's in that envelope? Apparently, Shane McMahon rehired the Texas Rattlesnake to win contract for 5 years, and I might even dive into the whole Austin McMahon story eventually, so yeah. Overall, this Raw was easy to watch once again. I don't watch these Attitude Era Raws for matches. There is some decent matches here and there, but like, if you're focused on the action, I don't think you should watch it. Just watch it thinking of an Attitude Era Vince Russo show, and you'll enjoy it. I certainly did. There was a story during this episode. Austin, what is he going to do to McMahon? They were building up to that moment up until the end when Austin pulled out the gun. I loved it. It was such a memorable moment. Bang 316. There was a bunch of stories, which is something I really love too, so yeah. What did you guys think of that moment? Please comment down below. And that's our first video. Make sure you hit a choke slam on the like button and perhaps a Stone Cold Stunner on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.